So the phone call came to me out of the blue. I was not expecting it, and I was contacted by someone from the San Carlos Apache tribe, and I'd never heard of this place, and they wanted to offer me a job, or at least an interview, and so I told them no, because I hadn't been looking for work for about a year and a half. I was in my dream job, but they kept at me. And like, you don't seem to understand, we're gonna give you airfare, we're gonna cover your expenses. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not looking for that. This is not a good season for that. And they kept going. I gave 4 no's, and they kept pushing me. And finally I said, I don't think I can be any clearer that I don't want this job. But if you want to give me a free vacation, then I'll take it. And she said, okay. I did not expect that answer. So I flew out to Arizona and got in the rental car, and I started driving here. And I came over Oak Flat, and I started to drop down into Devil's Canyon. I was overwhelmed with a sense of coming home. Now, there is absolutely nothing about the hoodoos and the rugged rocks of Devil's Canyon that is like Pasadena, California. 0. So that sense that was both internal and in my heart and in my head, it sure got my attention. And that feeling is what we're going to talk about today. So I'm guessing everyone has had that feeling. You know what I'm talking about. There's a certain feeling when you get home. Well, if we can figure out what that is, then we can figure out how to help people make that attachment to place, specifically the Cobre Valley Watershed. If we want people to be concerned and to support it, they need to have an emotional attachment to it. So that's what we're going to cover. And for me personally, I always like to know where a speaker is going. If I know where they're going, then I am able to kind of hang the material that they give me, and it makes more sense. So this is my roadmap. This is where I'm going to go. The first section, we're going to look at why focus on love of place. And then we're going to change and kind of shift a little deeper on how do we build connection to place. Then, how do we use that to support the watershed? And finally, I was hoping we could have a discussion to say, how do we turn this from words to action? What are our next steps? And in the midst of this, even though I plan to strewn nuggets of wisdom all through this talk, I am not expecting you to remember those. So what I'd like you to do is to look for 1 or 2 takeaways. 1 or 2 things that really resonate with you or that will change how you do your work, how you could be more effective in the places that you love. So let's jump into why even focus on love of place. In this little section, I'm going to try and talk about how does a place become home? How do we transform a place from livable to lovable? And then I want to introduce an idea that Peter Kageyama brought in about community love notes. It's something I'd never heard before, and it's really good. Where are you from? So when people would ask me that, I'd say, well, I'm from Pasadena. Even though I hadn't lived there for a number of years, and even though our home had burned down in a wildfire 7 years earlier, it was still home. So it took me a while to be able to say, Globe is home, which is where I live now. So that feeling of being at a place that is home is one thing that I want you to hold on to that feeling. Because when you hold on to that feeling, you'll know why we're going to start to use an odd language to talk about place. We're going to use emotional language to talk about place when it's usually talked about more in function and mechanistic terms. So moving from livable to lovable. Think about someone you love. You don't have to tell me, but just think it. Get someone in your mind that you love. Now, when we love somebody, we are going to cherish them. We'll protect them. We're going to do whatever it takes to help them reach their potential. We're going to see beyond their faults because we love them. Now, the same thing happens when we are loved. If we're loved, we can flourish, we can excel, we can go towards our potential, we can achieve great things. Well, the exact same thing applies to place. So a community that is loved, if we love a community, we're going to cherish it. We're going to protect it. We're going to step up and say, wait a minute, you don't seem to get all the coolness about this place. But also, a place that is loved flourishes. A place that is loved thrives. Right? It's like, well, the place can't feel it, but it makes a difference. And when a place is loved, it can overcome so many negatives. Just one positive can overcome a ton of negatives for a community. So we are going to talk about how do we move our understanding of the watershed and the places that we live using words that are different. It's going to be emotional words. And I first heard of this with a guy named Peter Kageyama. Peter Kageyama was speaking at the Arizona Rural Policy Forum, and I found his ideas transformative. I'd never thought of it. It's like you know when you hear something and it's like, oh my gosh, I knew that, but I didn't know I knew it. You know it at some level. Well, that's what Peter's work was for me. So I ended up buying all of his books, and I brought them here for those of you who are in person. And most of this talk is actually coming straight out of this book, For the Love of City. It's a love affair between people and their places. So if you enjoy what we're talking about, pick up this book, because I'm not even covering a tenth of this book, but even my examples are completely lifted from Peter's work. So I need to give a huge shout out to him. But what he was talking about is that if you're thinking about places, there's actually a nutritional pyramid or a hierarchy of needs for places, just like we would find if we're thinking about what healthy food is. So for a healthy city, you need it to, first of all, be functional. Now, if you don't have running water or working sewer, you are not going to have people living in your town. You need just the basic functions. But you also need it to be safe. You need someone who can respond if you're in an emergency. You need roads that you can travel on in a safe manner. You need drinking water that is safe. So these things are what we usually think of for cities. We think about them being functional and safe. But nobody falls in love with a sewer system. They don't. I mean, it's just, I don't care how great your maintenance is, people are not going to fall in love with your place because of that. You need to go beyond what Peter calls filling potholes. You have to fill potholes. I mean, if you don't, then people are going to be really angry. But think of it kind of like if you went to a restaurant. You expect a clean knife and fork. But you're not going to write a rave review because they had a clean knife and fork. If they don't have it clean, you're going to put that in your review. But if they do, it's the basic. We expect that. Well, that's what these basics are. But he says, instead of looking at the basics, we need to move up and think about our places and how can they be lovable. And that's when you start to move to the upper part of this hierarchy of need. So going to comfortable. Are there places people can sit? Are there parks? Are there coffee shops? Are there places that people can hang out with their friends? Convivial. That is a fancy word that means friendly, cheerful, welcoming. So is your town that way? A lot of people talk about this little town of Globe as being very welcoming. And they'll say, everyone I met was a friend. So I'm an Airbnb host. I hear about this. We do great at that, convivial. But what most cities don't think about is being fun. I've never heard, when I was on city council, never on our agenda was there an item about how can we be more interesting? How can we be a funner place? So this is where Peter says, think about the town differently. Instead of thinking about being amenity rich, you need to think about things like purpose, which is, or meaning, which actually is a level above this. I just couldn't find a colorful picture. So unfortunately, it's kind of a boring picture. But if you are fun and interesting, those places, this is starting to create comfortable, convivial, interesting. This is starting to create emotional connection. And places for which you have emotional connection you love. And mostly places that are lovable also become meaningful. There is a sense of purpose to that. If we want to attract high talent people, if we want to attract businesses, we have to be a place that provides emotional attachment, a place that would inspire people to love it. And what's fascinating is they did a recent interview of college grads, and they found that 50% of recent college grads say that place is more important than job in their career search. So the folks coming up that are going to be our business people and leaders, they really don't care what they're doing as long as they're in a place that's meaningful and that provides emotional attachment. We need to capitalize on that. Now, when Peter started using these emotional words, now I'm a psychologist. I'm a feelings doctor for kids. Emotional language is something I'm used to. But when he started using love language, like we're in relationship with a city, it was a little disconcerting to me. I just had never thought of things in that manner. But as he explains it, and as he goes through this, it really starts to make sense. So we build cities mechanistically. We build them like they're machines. But that's not how we talk about the places we love. If we think of a city as a machine, we are thinking about, like, if there's a problem, well, we fix it like we fix a car. But if it's an organism with which we have relationship, it's a whole different way of going towards solutions and making change. So Peter uses some terms that was really, it's kind of made me laugh at first, but how do you hold hands with your city? When you're in relationship with someone, one of the first things you start to do is holding hands, because you're showing everyone around you that you guys are together. It's a public affirmation of the relationship you have. Well, the way you do that with a city is that you're going to wear a t-shirt that has your place name. So it could be a Globe shirt or hat, or maybe it's a Cobre Valley Watershed water bottle. And if I'm carrying that around, people are going to see that I am somehow linked to that place. That's the equivalent of holding hands. Now, if you really got intense, there's people who actually do these silly things where they actually have marriage ceremonies with their town. I'm not suggesting that. But what he says is that if you're at the point where you are so committed to your place and you want a permanent link, those are the people that get tattoos of their town. Tattoos about something they love of that place. I'm not urging that. I'm from a generation much older that doesn't do tattoos. But there's other parts about being in a relationship that fit with place. So getting comfortable in third spaces. Our first space is where we live. Our second space is where we work or go to school. But our third space is where we hang out. So it could be a park. It could be a downtown. It could be a coffee shop. So when you are in love with someone, you can start to let your guard down. You can start to be comfortable with them. And with cities, we need to be able to provide people third places that they can enjoy and be in. Now, Peter goes into more. He goes into stuff about communication and like the impact of social media on place. And kind of how that's linked in relationship. He talks about how in food, you go out and you eat together, it's very intimate, and that food plays a part, which we, of course, are going to embrace, having the most Mexican restaurants per capita of any town, 10,000 or above. Even though we're not 10,000, we still beat them. So regardless. Or fun. Having fun with things with the person that you love. Now, these things that I started on, holding hands, marrying your city, getting comfortable with them, communicating, food, fun, that is what we give the city when we're in a relationship. But what the city gives us when we're in a relationship is love notes. Now, love notes are things like the chocolate on the pillow, the little note that you put in the lunchbox, maybe the fresh cut flowers. Well, cities can give that to us and show you 8 different ways. Now, this is not from Peter's book. This is my take on what love notes are, specifically thinking about my town, which is Globe. And for those of you who are watching this from a distance, Globe is a little mining town in eastern Arizona, about 100 miles east of Phoenix. So in my town, one of the ways that Globe shows it loves me is through giving me places where I can gather and make social connections. I put up pictures of my favorite places. You may have different ones, but for me, that farmer's market, I love the farmer's market. I go there usually with my dog, and I will shop for 5 minutes, and I will catch up with everyone else for 55 minutes. I love farmer's market. Now, another place I love, or thing I love, is the Globe Public Library does a walking club. Now, we're getting ready next week to start our 6th season of that, but what it is 6 weeks of time where you join with other people and you're gonna walk downtown 3 nights a week. I have made so many friends through that. The last time, one of my friends was an 11-year-old, and he and I would look for each other, and we walked together every single time and talked about things important to him, and it was just, I loved it. Now, a third. This is going to fall into both. I'm going to talk to you about love notes of places, and so the dog park is both a place, but really for me, it's a social gathering. So what ends up happening at our dog park is that there's people that come at this kind of the same block of time in the morning, afternoon, late afternoon, evening. And so you start to have the same people coming. So your dogs start to have besties. They have their favorite dogs they like to play with. But then the humans are starting to make connection. And I'm interacting with folks that I may not have interacted with any other way. Many different backgrounds, different passions, different interests, but we support each other. So when I had a flat tire a couple weeks ago, it was my dog park buddies that helped me. When I was sick, dog park folks went and got me food and picked up my dogs so they could go to the park. So a love note from a community to us is giving us places to make connection. Now, another thing that is a love note is events. Remember we talked about being fun or interesting? Well, do you guys remember the Fit Santa event? So there was the health department, Yale County Health Department was saying, we talk about Santa being all fat and jolly, but really you can have fun if you're skinny and in good shape. And so it was such a fun event. We have parades, I love the Christmas light parade, but this is from the Easter parade. But this middle one is one of my favorites. It's from Dogtoberfest. So people brought all their dogs, and we had dog costume contests and dog training and dog demonstrations, and the library had books about dogs, and it was so much fun. That is a love note. Now, I talked about how the dog park is a place. Here's some other places. So Beshwagawa is an archaeological park in our little community. But for about 40 years, it had been excavated and left open and left exposed to the elements. It was being destroyed by sun and rain and just not being protected. It wasn't until the 1980s that some of the people here in Globe said, wait a minute, we can't lose that, that's important. And they started working to restore and to save and to salvage and to protect. So because they had the idea that this was important, now Globe offers to us residents an extremely cool place. And this picture is a luminaria event where there was over 2,000 luminarias on these stone walls. And it's one of my favorite traditions of Christmas now is this event. So it has emotional attachment for me. Another place that our community offers is a tool lending library. You can take your library card, you can check out power tools and ladders and cement mixers for free for 3 days to clean up or fix your building, your home. This, in a small town, is so unique that Harvard University recognized Globe Tool Lending Library as a bright idea in America. They're like, this is awesome. We put it with our senior center, so our seniors with all the knowledge could help people in their thinking through their projects. Another place, our cemetery. How many places are going to tell a tourist to go up to a cemetery? We have fascinating history. It has not been cared for. It gets cared for, and then it has years of not being cared for, and then it's cared for. But this is important to our heritage. Another thing that's important to us are our parks. These are places that we can go hiking, we can play, we can have picnics. So Round Mountain, the community center, Gearsteady Park. The Old Dominion is one that I personally have had a lot of involvement with, so I love it. But at the Old Dominion, the mine that was reclaiming it planned to knock every single structure down. That was the easiest, the cheapest, and the safest way to reclaim this space. But they gave us a love note in saying, we are like, no, please don't, we want those. And they then put more money into saving these old structures so we could see them. I love them. And if you're not fully understanding or not quite sold yet on the idea of love notes, I want to bring up something that was a love note that's gone and that actually has strong emotional feelings for us. That's our historic depot that volunteers spent thousands of hours restoring. And that's Copper Spike, our first train. We had a historic tourist train that brought thousands of people to Globe. We had new businesses starting because of that. And just out of nowhere, the railroad changed hands and they shut it down. So people's anger and sadness was linked to much more than a train car, much more than a building. There was emotional attachment, which is why that felt like a loss. Let's talk about another type of love note, art. This is Isaac Caruso. If you haven't seen it, there's a new mural at our library. He came and did that. When we were trying to think about expanding our library, we bought the land on either side so we'd have room to expand. And we had a building that was condemned that needed to come down. But when we started to take the red room down, the community said, wait a minute, don't take our teepee down. And so the teepee was not in good shape. We actually had to work to make it keep standing. But people had emotional attachment to it. And so once we saved it and painted it, that was a love note. Now, right now, it's not fully painted. It's been repaired and it's been left, and I can't tell you how many people have come to me upset that the teepee hasn't been taken care of. They have emotional attachment. And if you have a love note to a place that you don't keep up, people are going to react. So we've got that on our to-do list, is to repaint. But art is in even the tiniest details. This is a compass that's at the ceiling of the train depot. And what's kind of neat is that these little filigree, all the pattern in here, Tanner, the guy that made this for us, he actually scanned a vent cover that we found in that space. We only found one, but it was so beautiful. It looked like that. That was what it was. And so he then used that. This becomes a love note to our community. We've got statues, we've got paintings, but we even have tiny things like bollards. Bollards are those things that are put up so that you don't hit something. And we were looking at how expensive it was going to be, hundreds of dollars to buy bollards to protect the Center for the Arts and the depot. But one of our local artisans, Jim Ole, said, hey, I can do better than that, and for less than that. And he designed these very artistic bollards for us. This is a love note from Jim, but also a love note from Globe to say, yes, we value that. Architecture. Some places do not value their historic architecture. They don't work to protect it, but we do. We have a historic downtown that's been put on the National Register of Historic Places. We have ordinances in place to try and protect this feeling. All that extra work that frustrates business owners at times is actually a love note to us, because people are hooked in, they are emotionally attached places. Another thing is signs. Now, this is one of the first things that got my attention when I came here from Pasadena, California, is I noticed that El Rey sign. And it was so cool, and it had all the neon, and it was lit. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to think about this place differently, because on the highway, Globe is not very impressive. I'm like, well, I think there's more to this place. And I love our old signs. Again, if you're not sure if there's emotional connection to sign, I want you to think about how you felt when these were gone. So under the palms, they just sawzalled this sign to get it down because they didn't value it. And people were angry about it. When the Tonto Hotel sign came down, now that one was being held up by one screw. The city said, you have to do something. This is going to hurt people. The tethers had broken, all the screws were off, but instead of rescrewing it and saving it, they just took it down. And people are upset about that. Or most recently, one of our signs that we love got painted over. The owners felt a pressure, and I won't even go into the whole story, but we lost that. And I still want to put it back. I mean, it's important somehow. The love notes can also be seen in little details. So maybe it's the type of light pole, or what your trash cans look like. Maybe it's what benches are, or like for us, we put in this clock. One of our beloved people, Kip Culver, worked on this so that we would have something to commemorate our 100th birthday. I love that clock. That clock makes me feel good. Another thing, tiny details. Now this is the new dog park. And the city public works, they made a bench in the shape of a dog bone, and they took an old fire hydrant and they repurposed it so that it's where we get water. They didn't have to do that. It would have been easier to do it some other way, but this was a love note. This was the extra. It's the little things that make a difference. So in a place, it is not the big actions, it is the millions of little actions that create the emotional attachment. If someone's holding a door, if someone's picking up trash, if someone's planting flowers, these are the things that make a difference in the overall lovability of a place. Now, these are all things that the city gives us, but this is one that another way that we can give back to the city, and it's through volunteering. So I have some pictures of some of the things and some of the local people who are doing volunteer work, whether it was cleaning up and fixing the playground, creating benches out of old mine ore car chassis, working at the Humane Society and playing and socializing the animals so they'll be adopted, painting old buildings downtown that are really in bad shape. When we volunteer, we are able to not only give back, but we're able to cement our relationship. Every stroke and every sweeping and every action that we do is strengthening the emotional attachment we have to a place. So I hope I have convinced you that little things matter and that having emotional attachment to place matters. If I have, then we'd move to this next one, which is how do we increase people's attachment to place? And in this section, I'm going to give you three, I think of them as tools, but it may be more concepts. And one is looking at what is an aspect of community satisfaction. Another is how do you create community or community engagement. And then there's a formula for great public spaces. And when I wrote that abstract about what this talk would be, I had grand plans, but I had to cut it to half. So I really planned to talk about great public spaces, but I'm only going to give you one slide on it. So in the future, hopefully we'll come back to the idea of making great public spaces. So if we know what's important for people to be satisfied, then we can bring more of that to a place. One of the first things that is consistently found in research about community satisfaction is the importance of aesthetics. That's another fancy word that really means attractiveness. So if a place is attractive, it matters to people. And mostly they're going to talk about it being attractive, even though I want it to be public art and some of that. They talk about it, about the natural spaces and the parks. So we, with the Cobre Valley Watershed, we have an opportunity to impact community satisfaction by having beautiful and healthy natural outdoor spaces for people. Another thing is social activities. This goes back to that idea of fun and interesting and making connection. But the third is a sense of openness. So this is how tolerant a community is of differences. In the midst of this, I don't have a picture for tolerance, but I did want to bring up this picture from right before we all closed down. I don't know how many of you went to Superior when they had their burro run. So all these people showed up with burros and they were doing this long distance race. And some of the people and their animals were dressed similarly. So there was one in the burro and the woman were in tutus and, Mexican serapes. And it was so much fun. I'm not about to do a 26-mile run, but I will show up every single time that they're going to have a race because I want to see the burros. So this is the type of social activity, fun activity. Now, a second tool I want to give you, or a concept, is the idea of community engagement. Now, there was a survey done 2006 to 2009 by the Knight Foundation, and they interviewed 28,000 people to see how or if they were engaged with their communities. And what they found is that about 40% are not engaged. Wait a minute, I think I've got the numbers wrong. Nope, 40% are unattached, 36% of people in a place are neutral, and about 24% are attached to their community. So that means potentially 7 out of 10 people aren't attached. So how do we move people from being unattached, move them up? We're not going to move them from angry to committed in a single step. As much as people say there's falling in love at first sight, but really, not really. What we want to do is how can we move them up one step in their connection and in their involvement with our community? And the way we do it is through little things. Again, I talked to you about millions of little things make the whole. It's the small things that people will remember about a place. It's the small things that make it different from the thousands of other towns in America that may be the same size or the same type of industry or whatever it is. It's the little things that matter. And it's also the people who are doing them that matters. So out of those 24% that are committed to their communities, about 1% are people that are co-creators. They are making a difference by doing the flower planting, the trash pickup, the painting of the benches. That 1%, those co-creators, are the ones that give us the community we love. Most of us consume. We use the parks, we use the roads, we call the police. But these are the folks that are actually creating. They are the catalysts for change. They are the connectors in a community. So finding those 1% and empowering them is a way we can build. Now, the final tool that I'm going to give you is from the Project for Public Spaces. And again, in a future talk, I hope to talk more about this. This is a fantastic organization. You can go online and get tons of resources. But what they have done is they have looked at communities all around the world, and they're like, which ones work? Which ones do people love? Which ones draw new life and really are givers of emotionality? What they found is a formula, and they call it the power of 10. So they say that for you to be successful, you need to have at least 10 major destinations in a city. In those 10 destinations, each one needs to have about 10 places. And in those 10 places, each one needs to offer at least 10 things to do. Now, the things to do might be sitting on a bench. It might be buying a drink. It might be shopping. It might be going to a museum. It might be. So if we think about our region, the Cobre Valley Watershed, to me, is one of the destinations of our region. And people aren't coming here to look at the watershed, but they may be coming to hike in the national forest. They may be coming to explore through public lands. That would be one of the things. We can figure out within that, what are the 10 places that we would emphasize? And when people go there, what can they do? Can they mountain bike? Can they bring their horses? Can they hike? Can they picnic? Can they rest? So this is a different way of thinking about the health of a place. We're coming to the end. In trying to figure out now how to go from just talk, how do we move to action? And I am going to just give you a couple of things that I think are important as we strategically plan. But also I want to tell you, if any of this has sparked your curiosity, I want to tell you where you can go to learn more. We don't have all the time, all the money, all the energy in the world. So what can we do that's the best use of our limited resources? Can we look at that power of 10 and figure out that maybe just creating a bench in a key location, one of those little things, is part of what will shift from livable to lovable? What has the most powerful public impact? When we say this, people think of big things, bringing a factory in or some giant something. No, it's the little things. Each little thing that we add to our community is a part of impacting. Now, some are more powerful than others, which is something that I would like us as a group to explore so that we have the most impact. Another thing is showing the love. So if we want people to connect to the watershed, do we have shirts with our logo? Do we have water bottles and hats? Can people show that they are connected and start to show the importance of this place to others? I had a whole slide, and we'll hopefully do it in the next one, about specifically looking at how the importance, the catalytic power of trails, and using trails and what the things are that legislators, they may not care that someone likes the forest, but they will definitely care that their real estate values are going to go up, or that business retention goes up, or that new business and new talent recruitment goes up. So we've got to be smart with bringing along partners, because the person that's making the laws or that's allocating the money may not realize that this is a really good return on their investment. So we need to share that. And we need to create great public spaces. We have so many. I don't think we quite have the 10-10-10 yet, but what can we do to help with that? Now, if this has kind of got your attention, you want to learn more, these are Peter's books that I have. And that first one, For the Love of Cities, is the one that most of this talk comes from. I was kind of excited to learn that he has a new one, The Emotional Infrastructure of Places, which was a whole concept I already wanted to talk to you about. I didn't know he'd written a book on it. So I just bought it. I'm very excited to read it. Another thing, I just want to give you a teaser on this. I want us to talk about the impact of trails in nature. And this book, The Nature Fix, was fantastic. Now, I've heard her speak, and her book is even better than her great speaking. But this talks about the scientific, what is happening in our bodies and our brains when we're out of doors. If we're out of doors for just a few minutes or a few hours or a few days, it changes. But she takes all this scientific info and actually makes it in a story that is very interesting to keep reading. We are considered a trail town for the Arizona Trail. That's a trail that goes from the bottom part of our state to the top. Now, we don't capitalize on that at all, but the Arizona Trail lists us as one of their trail towns. So this is something that I also think is a strategy we can talk about in the next talk. So coming to the end, I told you I would be asking you, what stands out for you? What are those one or two things you're going to take away? Which things sparked your interest, created some curiosity? What things, like I had said, prove that you were right all along? You just didn't have the words. And what are your next steps? The little things. What are the little things you hope to do in the next week or two? And what do you want us to do? I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for this privilege of talking with you. And I wish you well.